Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to the Strange and Beautiful Book Club. Deep Cuts.
Dune Edition.
We haven't done that in a while. All right. It's time for another Dune episode. And by that, I mean Children of Dune, which is
Or The Hill Kids.
Children of Dune, the book, the last book in the series that we have committed to doing as of right now. That doesn't mean that the last three in the first canonical 6 are not on the horizon. But these are kind of like Thanksgiving. They're a fucking feast. There is absolutely no way. You just are like, I think I'm going to read the 4th Dune book next week. And then I'm just going to talk about it on the podcast like it's no big deal because these are dense. And
It's like getting together with your family for Thanksgiving and then Christmas, like Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner,
yeah,
and then New Year's.
including that week of like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fuck week? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
just realized what the fuck is also Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I was trying to figure out how to work that into a joke, and I didn't. So I want to read you something. And to me, this is really the most representative section of the book about how Frank Herbert tries to occasionally have casual dialogue, but this man can't write a throwaway line to save his fucking life. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So this is later in the book. It's like 2/3 through the book. And it's when the Lady Jessica and Duncan Idaho are on the planet with Farad'n and Irulan's sister,
Yes.
Wencesia. Wencesia. I think that's her name. Anyway, they're fighting, quote fighting, because of course there's always like 6 layers of what's actually happening. Lady Jessica says, "A Gola considers himself a mere mortal," she jibed. "Compared to you," he said. "Leave," she ordered. "Such is my intention." He slipped out the door, passing the curious stare of the servant, who'd obviously been listening. So that was like, leave. I'm already fucking leaving. Great. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. I already did, motherfucker. I mean, that was his attempt at like a get out. I'm
Just
already on my way
filler.
out.
Yeah.
It was his attempt at like a witty, like a fast, witty banter. Like not banter, but like they're supposed to be fighting. But nobody's ever actually fighting. They're all like, let me have this paragraph long, illustrative dialogue in which I say 2 things but mean 25. And the other person's like, I hear all 25 and I'm going to rebuttal with my 40 different things that I mean. And so when he does try to write even like a quick thing like that, it still comes off as like...
Or how about this? When Ganima is telling Hera to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
She says, "Stuff that into your womb and give birth to it elsewhere."
Listen, I have so many. I should take a picture of all of the tabs that I have in this book. Was this my favorite of the 3? I think this was I think Dune Messiah still has my heart, but I definitely think I loved this up to about 3/4 of the way through the book. And I think even Frank Herbert hated this book 3/4 of the way through. Once he got to 75%, he was like, oh, shit. I've written so much dialogue. I need action. You know what? This I find probably helps you out. This was the last Dune book that was published in serial format. So this book was also published serially in a magazine, just like Dune Messiah was published serially in a magazine. So you're looking at every chapter is essentially like a short story that got sent out. And so you can kind of see that when you're reading it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it feels, it doesn't feel like it doesn't move, because it kind of does, but it definitely doesn't feel like, it feels like it's written so you won't feel bad if you can't read the next chapter like tomorrow or immediately after. It's definitely reads like, here's a snip, here's a snip, here's a snip.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense when you realize he's writing this for serial publication. And then later he compiles it all and sends it all out as a single book. For 4, 5, and 6, he's not going to do that. But for these ones, he does. So can you imagine for a minute, you're getting these magazines in the mail because you're living in the golden age of science fiction, and writers like Frank Herbert are just fucking getting delivered to your door every week for you to read new chapters.
A collection.
Can you fucking
Frank
imagine?
Herbert, Isaac Asimov.
Yeah, just like, oh, here's their new chapter for whatever it is they're writing right now. Oh, that's fucking great. Can't wait till next week to read the next one. Jesus Christ, that would have been fucking amazing. But anyway, so you're waiting for whatever this was published in. Probably not Amazing Stories, but let's just say Amazing Stories. You're like, oh, God, yes. And it comes in the mail. You open it up. You're so excited because last week you just found out. Wait, you've been with Leto. Leto's been at Jakarute. He's been forced to take the spice. At this point, he's literally lower than low. He's escaped. He's gotten away. He's gotten recaptured. And he's at the bottom of the barrel. The only place that Fremen go from here is death. And what's he going to do? Oh my God, how's he going to get out of this? How's he going to think his way out of this? And he wanders off into the fucking desert and he smears baby sandworms all over his skin and becomes a motherfucking superhero serial killer and runs off into the desert like, fuck y'all, bitches. And that's the end of the book. And I mean, it's not the end of the book. He does shit after he becomes a superhero, but you're just like, what? I mean, up until this point, superhumanness has been theoretical, right? Like if you take enough spice, you can kind of be a human computer. Or if you take enough spice, you can manipulate religion and bloodlines just by being really super smart.
The only really superhuman thing are the navigators.
And prescience. And I can see.
But physically changing the world.
Yeah.
Physically changing the world around you, reality, the whole folding space for faster than light travel is the biggest physical power that has been shown in the stories. Everything else is all internal, mental, knowledge related.
I can make my mind work really, really well.
I can get memories from genetic memories from my ancestral history or inherit the memories of previous reverend mothers or that kind of thing.
No, sorry.
Until now.
I can't. Okay. I knew this was coming because I watched the Children of Dune miniseries before I read the books. And this happens at the end. And I have to say that the way it's portrayed in the miniseries is so much better than the way it is in the book. Because in the book, he's kind of like, oh yeah, you can do this thing with the sand trout where you smooth them out on your skin. And then kids do it, they make gloves out of them as a joke. And then when they fall off, they take their water and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I think I could do that, but I could actually integrate them and make them my skin. And I knew this was coming. A, I've seen the Children of Dune miniseries. And B, we get the my skin is not my own repetition throughout the book. So you're like, okay, something is coming. He's going to change in some fundamental way. Okay, what is it going to be? Well, he's going to become part worm. In fact, I think he becomes a worm.
Eventually.
I don't know if that's a spoiler. It's probably not a spoiler. They've been out a really long time. I'm really fucking sorry. So it's just...
The first time I heard the line, my skin is not my own, when Leto says it to I think
Ganima.
Stilgar.
Oh, Stilgar.
I thought it was Paul inside Leto speaking, saying, "My skin is not my own," because I am the memory of Paul speaking to you through this body that is not my body.
Yeah.
But then that wasn't it at all.
No, I think that's good. I think it's supposed to be a bit misdirection because definitely one of the overarching themes of the novel is like Alia and Leto and Ganima are all preborns. They all contain the knowledge of millennia of people. All of them had it from birth, so they've never actually had the time to develop their own personality because, of course, Jessica has it too. Although she kind of let it go or suppressed it or whatever, but it's because she was a fully formed person. And then she was gifted with this knowledge and she was like, cool, I can compartmentalize that. I'm not really worried about it.
Right.
Whereas Alia and Leto and Ganima didn't have that luxury.
It's like the archive in the Dresden Files.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, we see Dune Messiah and Children of Dune are intended to be a fugue. They're intended to be a 3-part narrative. And Dune is really like narrative triumphant. It is the, I save the world, I come into my power, I create a future where, things are going to be different.
Right. And you hit a point where you could put, and they all lived happily ever after at the end, what we do. And it kind of fits.
Right, and that's what we usually do with the adaptations, which I know Villeneuve is planning on doing Dune Messiah as well, which I don't know how you could do Dune Messiah and not do Children of Dune, because that would just end with him walking off into the desert with, like, noping the fuck out with his, like, middle finger in the air. Double middle
fingers, yeah.
Like, y'all, I'm leaving. I'm sorry, I made a mess, and I'm going to leave y'all to clean it up. I mean, you also can't fully understand Dune without Dune Messiah, but then I feel like you need to follow all the way through. Even with the superhero ending, you need to follow all the way through to Children of Dune to really get the, like, where he was going.
Yeah.
So Dune is like narrative triumphant. Dune Messiah is the inversion. It is triumphant to tragedy. And then Children of Messiah is the ultimate expression of the tragedy created by the events in Dune. So this book's a fucking downer is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Every single character in this book is a tragic figure. Irulan is a tragic figure. She is nothing like what she was supposed to be. She is nothing like who she was when she married Paul. All of that has been left behind to be a servant of this empire that isn't even hers. And Alia, who is really almost the greatest tragic figure in the entire book because she had absolutely no choices.
Right, even worse than Paul.
Paul had choices, at least at the very beginning. Alia never did. Alia's preborn because her mom was like, pregnant? Me? No. Of course I can take drugs. I'm not pregnant. And she comes out preborn because Mommy Dearest didn't feel like telling anybody that she was pregnant because she wanted to save her Paul over the life of... She chose Paul over Alia is what she does.
Yeah.
Basically. And as soon as everything wraps up at the end of Dune, she nope the fucks out and leaves and goes back to Caladan.
And leaves Alia behind.
And leaves Alia, which this takes place 9 years after Paul walked off into the desert.
Which was 12 years after the end of Dune.
Right. Which means Alia, if she's in her mid-20s, has been alone since she was a child. Like, an actual child.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure Jessica is gone in Dune Messiah. She's not in Dune Messiah at all. She is off on Caladan with Gurney Halleck, which everyone refers to as her lover, even if only in his own mind. Which makes me feel really sad for Gurney, because everyone's like, there's no way she's fucking him. But he wishes he was fucking her. It's sad. But Alia, of course, is our main tragic figure, and she is actually abomination by this book, which means she has been taken over by her past lives, specifically the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Because, of course, she is a descendant of, like, she's the granddaughter of Baron Harkonnen. Yeah. And so he takes over her because it's his ultimate revenge on the Atreides to use Alia as a pawn to undermine the Atreides empire. And then there's the twins, Leto and Ganima, who really are almost on par with Alia for tragedy because their mom died in childbirth. And then their dad was like, well, I was really only here for Chani. And then he leaves. He's like, they've got great aunts. They've got great, this is going to be fine. And he just leaves and walks off into the desert. He kind of has to. I mean, that's the ultimate end of his story.
Right. There's the, I can't really deal with the pain of what I've lost.
Yeah.
I need space to do that. But then more significant than that is I need to disappear for the long-term destruction of my godhead.
Right. He can't stick around and raise his kids and also end what he feels is his deity, like his divinity. He can't, which he just becomes a martyr, but it was really the only thing he could do. There was no other way for him to end that.
Right.
And then we have Leto and Ganima, Leto and Ganima have the same drawback as Alia, but they have
they have each other.
They have each other, and they have the value of watching Alia go through this.
Right.
So they've seen all of the mistakes that Alia has made, and now they don't have to make them. So they have decided that the thing that undermines Alia is her spice intake. Because she takes in so much spice, she goes into the trances, and those trances are what allow her past people, like the weight of her prebornness, to take over her body. So they don't do that. They don't look into the future at all. They have dreams. Sometimes the future forces itself into their lives, but they don't.
The same way it did with Paul.
Yeah.
Even when he was on Caladan, he would have dreams, future dreams.
Yeah.
But he didn't go full on, like, future sight trance.
Right. And Jessica is literally everyone's a tragic character, but Jessica's tragedy is she gets to witness the ultimate fruition of her bearing a son instead of a daughter. So that one act of love at this point has killed billions of people, created a theological empire, which is now in effectively ruins. Yeah, theocracy, which is now effectively in ruins because Alia can't keep her shit together. And so the novel starts, of course, 9 years later with Jessica's coming back. She's coming back. She's coming back to, quote, visit, which absolutely nobody believes.
Right.
Alia's like, she's coming back to test me. And Jessica's like, can I come see my daughter? And she's like, yeah, you don't. You don't care that much about me. There's no way you are actually on your way here to see me. Which is fair. She actually isn't. She gets up to some fucked up shit in this book. Jessica?
Yeah. Yeah, because she's...
When we find out that, later when Leto gets kidnapped by the people at Jakarutu, and they force him to take the spice because she has told Gurney to force him to take the spice?
It wasn't Jessica, it was Alia.
We think it was Alia? Oh, no, posing as his...
They say that Alia was faking all of the Jessica's communications with Gurney. So Gurney thought he was like coordinating things with Jessica, but actually it was Alia.
Oof.
So Jessica actually had no knowledge of what Gurney was doing the whole time.
Oh.
She was incommunicado.
Yeah, because she noped off again. She was like, God, I fucking hate Dune.
She kind of got noped.
Yeah.
Off.
Yeah. She didn't fight it. She was like, oh, right. Okay, well, we'll go.
Yeah, she recognized the pressures that were there.
To be fair, the preacher does tell her, like,
she read the room.
Go. Yeah, the preacher tells her to go. He goes, you need to go because there's going to be a student waiting for you. So this was the quote that I highlighted from this section when she comes back. So Jessica gets off and she's looking up at the keep. Because remember, the keep is like the largest structure ever constructed. And Jessica thinks, now it housed the most powerful governing force in the Imperium. Alia's, quote, Society of the Faithful, which she had built upon her brother's body. This place must go, Jessica thought. Because Jessica's like, oh no, this is not good. Because at this point, a large percentage of Dune has been terraformed. And there's green grass, there's trees, there's so much moisture that a lot of people wear still suits that are not even still suits. They're just like fashionable facsimiles.
They're cosmetic
Yeah.
still suits.
Everyone has become water fat.
Yes, and there's only the narrow band around the equator that used to be the deep desert that even the Fremen were like, we're only riding a worm through here.
Yeah.
We're not going to stay.
That's like the
And
only place
now
the worms still
that's-
exist.
yeah.
Yeah. Worms are dying out, which means that spice is becoming more precious. And this is the world we enter into. Alia is possessed. Jessica is returning. Leto and Ganima are 9 going on 9,000. Like really, really weirdly old. So much so that I really feel like Frank could have reminded us more often that they're like 9-year-olds and they look like 9-year-olds.
Right.
Every once in a while they'll be having a conversation and somebody's like, aren't you a child? And they're like, don't ever fucking call me a child. You have no idea what I've been through and the things I can remember. Or as Leto says, memories which fastened him to places his flesh had never known, presented him with answers to questions he had not asked. So when we pick up at the beginning, we sort of live in this space for a really long time. Like we live in Leto manipulating Jessica, Jessica manipulating Ganima, Ganima and Leto manipulating Jessica, all 3 of them manipulating Stilgar.
And Stilgar fighting this sense that something's wrong and there's not really anything he could do about it.
Yeah.
Except kill the twins.
Yeah, he's stuck in this, I must serve. And the person I must serve is Alia. Or at least I must not act against Alia. And he's stuck in that for a really long time.
Right. Between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I'm almost disappointed with Stilgar, the way Stilgar gets treated in this book, because he's such a mentor character in Dune. And then he's really sort of a support character, like supporting Paul in Dune Messiah. And by the time we get to Children of Dune, he's like a vestigial. He's vestigial. He's kept around for his name and for what he represents to the other Fremen. But he really has no more power or influence. And it's kind of sad because he's still acting. Because when we meet him, he is this confident, quietly self-assured ruler of a people. He knows who he is, he knows what his role is, and he knows exactly how it will end. And then all of that gets taken away, and now he's just left with, I have to remain honorable, but I don't know what that means anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's why at the end, when Duncan comes to him, because ultimately Duncan realizes that Alia is effectively dead and that her shell is walking around with other people inside of it, which is kind of creepy when he realizes that, because they're married in this book. And she's going to have him killed. And he's like, oh, motherfucker. So he leaves and he's with Stilgar and he's like, Stilgar, it's not Alia. You got to get the twins and go. Like you are serving the wrong master.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting when Duncan does that. There's a parallel like plot arc where, is it Jessica? Someone's trying to get a message to Duncan to say, hey, like Stilgar is still like a wild beast of a man.
Yeah.
There's just this thin veneer of civilization on top. And he needs to shrug that off so he can do his fucking job. And they're trying to get this message to Duncan to say, here are the words that will like awaken
Stilgar.
Stilgar,
Yeah.
but it doesn't get through. But Duncan still realizes he needs to like shake up Stilgar.
I think he does
And
get
he
told because
figures
that's
out
what
his
he
own way.
uses at the end.
Oh, it's those 3 insults?
Yeah, because he gives him the 3, like the third most greatest insult, the second greatest insult, and then the fucking greatest insult a Fremen could ever receive.
Okay, so maybe that message did get through and I missed that part.
Yeah, because that's what he ultimately has to do, because Stilgar's like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but at this point, everything's in chaos. There's rebellion, but I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral. I have been granted this siege as my space of refuge, and I intend to hold it. And one of the things that I need to hold it is I can't send any messages. Because remember, Duncan's trying to send messages out. And Stilgar's like, I can't. I'm neutral. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Alia is using you. She's expecting you to act like this. You need to act unexpectedly. And Stilgar's like, that's not a thing I'm capable of doing. And so then he basically gives him the 3 worst insults ever. And Stilgar loses it and stabs Duncan. And Duncan gets the saddest fucking line in the book. 2 deaths for the Atreides and both of them meaningless. Like neither one means more than the other. It was like, oof, because he dies twice in service to the Atreides.
Yeah, but he forces Stilgar's hand.
Right, he
because
does. But
now
it's still
Stilgar
just
murdered Alia's
why
husband.
do I always have to die to prove the situation is serious? Which is even sadder because I'm pretty sure he gets brought back.
Yeah.
So poor Duncan dies.
Yeah, I read somewhere that Duncan has the most deaths in the series.
Of course he fucking does. And that's what gets Stilgar to be like, oh shit, I guess I need to act. And that's when we get kind of cool older Stilgar for a little bit. And then by the end, they're like, where's Stilgar? And they're like, oh, he's in the dungeons. I'll deal with it later.
Yeah, by the end, we hit the 3/4 mark in the book.
Yeah, and shit just hits the fan.
And Leto goes off. And Stilgar's kind of a foil for Leto in regards to Leto kind of just working through his long-term plan. What is the value of tradition? And so Stilgar kind of explains, he can explain in an exemplary way.
Yeah.
Here's how I, as a very, traditional Fremen, have used our cultural traditions to maintain a stable, community. And this is why. And Leto's like, yeah, but then the world changes and now you're fucking screwed.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do I need to do? And that's the last value that Stilgar has for the plot.
Yeah. And then really he writes him right out. He's just like, oh yeah, he's down in the holding cell with Irulan.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk anymore about them. They're done now. So goodbye.
Yeah. We've put them on the shelf until later.
Until never, because I'm pretty sure they're dead by the
next
book.
Right. Yeah, because the next book is in the far future.
Yeah. There's a couple new characters in this book too. There's Princess Wensicia. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Irulan's sister.
Faradin's mother.
Faradin's mother. And Faradin is the one that ultimately Lady Jessica goes to teach. And I thought it was interesting learning, okay, look at your hands. And he's like, all right, I'm looking at my hands. She's like, now they're baby hands. And he's like, yeah, fucking baby hands are my hands. And she's like, make them baby hands. Come get me when you do. And she just leaves.
This is going to be hard for Rodden.
Yeah.
Baby hands.
Baby hands. And he's
now
like,
old hands.
He comes in later. He's like, I did it. I made them baby hands. Really, it's, I can control my perception of my body. And through that, I can ultimately control my body.
Yes. It's practicing flexing the,
mental muscles.
Directing your attention at specific things.
Yeah.
To control what in the your environment is significant to you
Right.
for just collecting information for making better decisions.
Yeah. And this book was interesting because, I guess once you realize it's serialized, some of the way that the characters are brought in and then sort of ushered off into the wings make more sense. Because we open the book with Princess Wencesia, and she is training those Lushu tigers.
Yeah.
And it's very dramatic, and the tigers are killing little children and eating them, and this isn't even the first time. And she feels like they're finally good and trained, so she has them kill the operator because now she's going to send somebody else off to be the operator. And she's like, well, we're gonna do this because my Farad'n, my little baby Farad'n, he needs to be the emperor. And you're like, oh, she's gonna be the main bad guy in the book, and she's not even like a little
she
bit.
gets kicked out.
And we even she has like a sidekick whose name I can neither remember nor pronounce. So read the book.
Tekyanik.
Okay, well,
that's how
I
pronounce it in my head.
I don't know. He's there, and she's like, cool, I'm gonna need you to convert to Muad'Dibism. And he's like, you need me to what now? And she's like, I need you to get some fucking religion. And he's like, for what? And she's
so
like,
that Farad'n can get some religion. So Farad'n
will get some religion. And he's like, God, fine, whatever. For you, my lady. He keeps calling her like my lady, not the proper title. And she keeps getting mad at him. And this maybe should have been a clue with the fact this is going to be just a petty character. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately she does send the tigers. And they don't kill anybody, but Leto and Ganima already knew they were coming, so they're like, cool, this is the chance we've been waiting for. So they go out
to fake one of our deaths.
Yeah, so they go out intentionally so that the tigers can find them. And then Leto is the one who's like, okay, I'm dead now. Look at me. I'm dead now. Ganime's like, you're dead now. Okay. And he's like, I'll be back. And this was kind of a sad moment because up until this moment, they'd spent every second of their lives together. And then this is where they will go off and have separate experiences, and they will never be the same person again.
So, yeah, he's kind of mourning the loss of the fact that until this moment, they'd spent so much of their time together that their internal model of the other person was so accurate that they could just they could both sit in a room and pretend to have a conversation with each other in their heads.
Yeah.
And they would both be having the identical conversation.
Yeah.
Because telepathy is not a thing.
Right.
Which we've established. And once he leaves, their lived experience will be so different that they won't be able to have that kind of parallel, identical, emergent knowledge of each other ever again.
Ever again.
They won't be able to
they won't be able to come back together again in the same way. Ever.
They'll never have that again.
And then she does that thing where she brainwashes herself into believing that he's gone and dead so that they'll be able to interview her with a truthsayer, and the truthsayer won't be able to guess that she's lying. So she's literally watching him ride off in the worm, and she's like, Leto would have really liked to watch that guy get on that worm. I'm so sad he's dead.
Too bad he didn't. Too bad he won't live.
But then again, who does? So she goes back. And this is really the beginning of the what on earth? Because this is right after this is when Duncan kidnaps Jessica, because Alia's like, listen, I need you to kidnap my mom and,
take care of her.
Take care of her. And he's like, oh, take care of her. Take care of her. And she's like, no, take care of her. And he's like,
make sure she has a house and plenty of food. No, Duncan.
But don't tell me about it.
Wink.
I need deniability. And so he's like, cool, I'll take care of her. And so he kidnaps her and takes her to Seleucus Secundus.
Yes. And this was a nice nod because while he's planning this, he gets a message that's coded with the special passphrase that only Paul and he had.
Yeah.
That's if you get this passphrase, you do whatever the message is. And the message is from the preacher.
Yes, we haven't even talked about the preacher. This blind guy shows up with a guide. And he's like, y'all, Muad'Dib is fucking trash. This empire, trash. I spit upon this empire. I hate everything about it. Y'all are stupid, and I can't believe you're following them. And let me really, really beautifully extol how much of an idiot every single one of you are.
This is such a clever and effective use of Paul.
Yes. Oh my God.
In finishing the deconstruction of all the deification and mysticism around Paul.
Yeah, because y'all didn't really believe Paul was going to die, but the desert was like, no, thank you. And he got picked up by the Fremen, the like mythical Fremen, the Fremen that even the Fremen don't think exist over in Jakaruttu. And they were like, we can make use of you. And so they kept him around, gave him a guide, sent him back in to sow chaos, which is kind of exactly what he wanted to do anyway. And he has this moment, several great moments, but he goes to see Farad'n. Like they take him to see Farad'n because Farad'n's been having dreams. And of course, his bodyguard guy is now a Muad'Dibian. So he's like, yeah, I know a guy. He's like, it's really, but he never actually he does it just because she tells.
Tayekanik. Maybe it's Tayekanik.
I don't know. He does it just because the princess tells him to, but he's never like he just learned. He reads the Bible and he's like, yeah, I could probably.
He goes through the motions.
Yeah.
For Farad'n's sake.
But he brings the preacher there and he's like, I brought this man. He can translate dreams.
except Paul just used the voice to make everyone do what he wanted.
Well, he has a veil.
Oh, such a power move.
He has a veil. And they're like, yeah, he's blind, but the veil lets him see. And they're like, oh, that must be one of them Ixian things. And he's like, yeah, it's an it's
definitely an Ixian device.
It's just a piece of cloth he keeps in his pocket. Like he pulled his handkerchief out and stapled it to his own forehead and was like, now I can see, y'all. And they're like, ooh, cool. And so he goes to see Farad'n and Farad'n tells him his dream. And the preacher's literally like, cool. And he goes, okay, well, what does it mean? He goes, oh, I didn't tell you. I'd tell you what it meant.
He's like, I interpreted your dream. Yes, you're cool.
Yeah.
We're done.
Good. Can I go home now? And he's like, we got to tell me. He's like, no, that wasn't part of it. No, you didn't tell me I had to tell you anything.
Read the fine print.
Read the fine print. And they're like, just get this man out of here. And so they take, he's like, bye, y'all. So he gets to go back to Arrakis. Paul is like, I can't describe my love for the character of Paul. Think of the growth of this character. We meet him when he's 15.
Right. This is character development.
You want to talk about how to make a character? This is how you fucking make a character. Because when we first meet him, he's like, I don't know. I think I can maybe have some prophetic dreams or something. And then we go from that to the end of Dune where he's like, I'm basically God. And that's pretty fucking cool. And then we get to Dune Messiah and he's like, I'm really tired of this. I should never have been God. Who did this?
Right. I thought I was God, but that was when I was young and naive.
Yeah, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own decisions once again, but now I'm the only one responsible for taking care of them. And he's like, what do I need to do? Well, I know what I need to do. And so he does what needs to be done. And then it doesn't work. Alia somehow holds it together with her fingernails. He becomes a martyr. He becomes even more of a deity than he ever was when he was alive. Almost more so because he walked off into the desert and they're like, he was a true Fremen. He must have been a god because even at the end, he was a true Fremen. And he has to come back and be like...
No other man who became emperor of the universe
would just walk away like that.
Would have sacrificed themselves.
That's so
purely
cool.
For the principle of the matter.
So he has to come back again and be like, listen, please. I'm not Muad'Dib. I kind of look like I'm not Muad'Dib. Okay. But if I were Muad'Dib, what I'd tell you guys is, fucking stop it. What is wrong with you? And so Leto actually starts describing this thing called the Golden Path because
right. And I really like all the philosophical like expounding on this idea that when Paul was using his future sight he was picking a future, and then because he was just kind of, oh, here's how I do this future sight thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, first try, hey, it worked. He never thought, oh, maybe there's another way to do this. Maybe there's a more like nuanced, careful way to look at the future and figure out what I need to do. But he just like grabs onto it,
Yeah.
holds it tight, but that it's a trap.
Right.
And he doesn't realize it's
Prescience
a trap
is a
until
trap.
way, way, way too late.
Yeah.
It's like end of Children of Dune was when he really realizes this whole prescience thing. I put myself in a cage.
Yeah.
On a train.
On a runaway train.
Yes, I set myself on a runaway train, and there's one set of tracks.
Yeah.
I can't steer this thing because
Right.
I'm locked in so hard.
Because that's the trap of prescience.
And Leto realizes, just like with Alia, Paul and Alia both had this tragic thing happen, and they failed to utilize it properly.
Yeah.
And Leto and Ghanima, seeing how badly like Paul and Alia fucked it up, are like,
Yeah.
okay, those are the mistakes we don't make.
Right.
So they both learn, okay, we don't do the thing where we're going to get possessed by our ancestors. We know to like be vigilant and not let that happen to us, because we saw how badly it's worked out for Alia. And then Leto, gets kidnapped and forced into the spice trance.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, when I do this whole prescience thing, I'm not going to hold tight. I'm going to let
it
go.
flow.
And
Yeah.
he very explicitly describes, okay, I'm going to just dip my toes in and look around like a broader view than Paul ever took. And then I deliberately back myself out and blind myself to the future, so that because the more closely you're monitoring the prescience stuff,
Yeah.
the more you trap yourself into the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he dips his eyes in, looks around. Okay, I'm going in the right direction. Back out, and then he's at risk for unexpected things. But hey, unexpected things mean new options.
Right. And he's really struggling with this golden path, which I feel like every time they say it in the book, if you ever made an adaptation, like a ridiculous adaptation, it should have like a golden path.
With like a ripple of water. Like,
yeah, like a bloop, golden path every single time, because they say it with just like, and that someone always repeats it. He'll be like, the golden path. And Ghanem is like, the golden path. And it's the one, like the needle they have to thread to avoid the complete extinction of the human race. Because fucking thanks, Paul. I guess we should go all the way back and thank Leto Kynes' dad. The one that...
Liet Kynes?
Yeah, sorry. Liet Kynes' dad. The one that put in their minds that they could make Arrakis green.
Yes.
Because they're like, well, we want it green. And he's like, cool, then I'll fucking make it green.
I know how to do that.
I know how to do that.
I will teach you the ways.
We'll get it done. And then Alia takes over. And one of the things that's happening, of course, is she's possessed by the Baron Harkonnen. And the wanton destruction of the spice trade, and therefore the wanton destruction of the universe, is exactly what the Baron Harkonnen wants. So I think it's really creepy when they start describing how they're walking through the desert and they'll just see a worm dead on the surface and they can smell it for miles because it's so fucking big. But Leto at the very end, of course, becomes Super Leto. He gives up everything, including his genitalia. So can we all take a moment for that sacrifice? Poor kid. He's only 9.
Already lost his balls.
Already lost his balls. I mean, he knew what he was giving up. You can't be like, well, he didn't know what he was giving up because he's like thousands of years old. He's like, fine, it's fine. I've had sex before. I just haven't had it with like this body. Although we mention the word loins entirely too much in the last 25%. Everything like clenches his loins. Everything throbs in his loins. I was just like, please, there are other places for people to feel emotions. I'm sure men feel emotions in places other than their balls. But he becomes superhuman and then he chooses fucking violence. He's like, oh, you've been storing up water? Not anymore. And so he starts going around and just destroying all these reservoirs or qanats. Qanat.
Oh, yeah. Quanats.
Quanats.
Is how I pronounced it in my head.
He just walks up and starts punching holes in them. So they're like, what's destroying these things? And they name him like the desert demon.
Yes.
And he's like the Tasmanian devil. He just shows up because he no longer needs anything. His body is a still suit. His skin is like a living organism that produces a fluid he can eat.
Oh, I heard about this biology thing called kleptoplasty.
Okay.
And there are certain organisms, most of them are like sea slugs, and some of them are single-celled organisms, but they are like single-celled organisms or like animals. Yeah. That eat plants, things with chlorophyll, and they don't digest the chloroplasts. They integrate the chloroplasts into their own cells so that the chloroplasts produce nutrients for them.
Okay. So that's what he does.
And so that's kind of what Leto does, is he integrates the sand trout into his body. Yeah. And then the sand trout are just constantly putting out their cilia and like getting nutrients from the environment and producing food for Leto.
Literally, like he'll sleep in the sand. He will send up a part of his body as a snorkel. I'll just leave up to you what part of his body goes up to be a snorkel. And then he sends out
it's one long finger.
And then he sends out like cilia. His body automatically sends out cilia to gather resources from the sand to produce more food to feed him.
So he is fully autonomous.
Yeah, he's fully autonomous.
He does not require civilization to keep himself alive.
The fuck is the ending to this book? And then he ends up finding his dad because he shows up and he's like waiting. And this worm rides up and off get 2 people. And one of them is the Jakarutu guide who is like part guide but part keeper for the preacher / Muad'Dib. And Leto is like, sup, Paul? And Paul's, to his credit, is like, I think he's a little bit like, oh, good, my son is not dead. Because he thinks his son is dead.
Yes, because all credible reports point to Leto died.
And he's like, Dad, I've come to kill you. And he's like, fucking finally. Like, Jesus. He's like,
I'm glad you're alive, and I'm glad this is going to end.
He's
and
like,
then,
I am so done.
And then he's like, Father, I did what you were afraid to do. And he's like, oh, shit.
He's like, oh, no. He's like, no, this isn't, no.
Right. He's so glad that Leto is alive, and then he realizes what Leto did and his terror at when he considered that option for himself, which we never actually discussed. That's all kind of retconned in.
Yeah.
But, okay, sure.
Yeah, it's fine.
Even though we were in Paul's head the entire book.
There's so many layers. It was when we were...
I guess it would have
from
been...
another point of view character. It's during the 2 years that we skipped.
I was thinking it was during the 12 years.
Oh, could
between
be.
the end of Dune and the beginning of Dune Messiah.
Yeah.
Was probably this just gradual realization in Paul's mind that he's stuck.
Yeah.
He's grasped.
Yeah, and to get out, he'd have
prescience.
to make choices he wasn't willing to make.
Right.
Yeah.
In his mind, the cost of becoming the worm was too high for the perceived benefit, or it's it's kind of the end justifies the means
Well, Leto becomes
decision.
inhuman. He's not
Right.
human anymore, and he will not make human-like decisions.
And what is this like mythical battle that will destroy most of the human race? What do they call it? Do you remember?
It means the whirlwind, though, doesn't it? It's at the end. He's like, I will bring about the Kralizak. Kralizak?
Yes. Yeah, the Kralizak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
The last wind of Kralizak.
so Paul's like, if I do that, it'll bring about Kralizak, which is this.
Yeah, and then we quote the Bible because
Mythical.
just fucking cuz.
Yeah.
And I stood upon the sand, and I saw a beast rise up out of that sand, and upon the head of that beast was the name of God. I love the melodrama so much. So much. You know what Frank Herbert wasn't afraid of? Melodrama.
Nope.
He wasn't like, is this going too hard? Am I going too hard? He was
No,
like,
I need
he's
to
like-
amp it up. Every
he's
time
like,
he
no,
thought,
not hard enough.
yeah, every time he
Not
thought,
hard
am I
enough.
going hard? It's like Phil Collins doing soundtracks for movies.
Yeah.
Am I going hard enough? No, I need to go harder.
Yeah, here we go. As with so many other religions, Muad'Dib's golden elixir of life degenerated into external wizardry. Its mystical signs became mere symbols for deeper psychological processes, and those processes, of course, ran wild. What they needed was a living God, and they didn't have one, a situation which Muad'Dib's son has corrected.
The body of Muad'Dib is a dry shell like that abandoned by an insect, Leto said. He mastered the inner world while holding the outer in contempt, and this led to catastrophe. He mastered the outer world while excluding the inner world, and this delivered his descendants to the demons. The golden elixir will vanish from Dune, yet Muad'Dib's seed goes on, and his water moves our universe. So melodramatic.
To choose and manage a vision required you to balance on a single thin thread, playing God on a high tight wire with cosmic solitude on both sides.
And here's one. This sounds like it's quoted almost exactly from Alan Watts.
Okay.
So one of the things Alan Watts talks about when he's trying to explain a lot of the like Eastern mythology in terms that like Western people can understand is that there's the universe.
Yeah.
And the universe wants to know more about itself. So it creates minds that are limited, that are ignorant of the fact that they are part of the universe, that they are the universe observing itself, so that you can get some more like surprising interactions. One example he uses is to convey the idea is, okay, imagine you can like have lucid dreams on demand.
Okay.
You can do anything you want to do. So, and every night you can live like 80 years. You can do like a full lifetime of doing whatever you want to do. Every desire you can have it met. After a while, you get bored. Okay, so then you start to have grand adventures. You're the hero of these epic stories. Well, then you get bored of that too. And then after you go through a few more iterations, eventually you go into a dream, but you make yourself ignorant of the fact that you are in a dream.
Yeah.
And so Alan Watts is in like a lecture hall explaining this to people listening. He's like, and then one night, like one of these dreams where you have made yourself ignorant of the fact that you are dreaming, that you are basically a god in
Yeah.
like this universe, you find yourself sitting in this lecture hall listening to me. And so the line I have highlighted from the book is, to be a god can ultimately become boring and degrading. There'd be reason enough for the invention of free will. A god might wish to escape into sleep and be alive only in the unconscious projections of his dream creatures.
Yeah.
In I read one of Alan Watts's books called The Taboo Against Knowing Yourself. One of the like conclusions toward the end of another like parable style thing is human consciousness is God playing hide and seek with itself.
Okay. I mean yeah, I've always liked that version of life and death.
Yeah.
So that works out.
And he Frank Herbert hits that, like he hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't overbear it. He doesn't go over the top with a lot of that more abstract philosophy, like existential philosophy, like Eastern mysticism stuff, but he does it just the right amount.
He does. You kind of feel like, are we going too far sometimes in Dune and Dune Messiah? But he doesn't go hard on it. He doesn't repeat himself.
Yes.
In Children of... You don't
He's like,
feel
here's a concept that
Yeah.
I am making an instance of this concept in the story.
Yeah.
And that's just planting a seed in your mind.
Yeah.
To help you have some more options for how you think about the universe.
I mean, it's very archetypally religion. We get a Messiah. We get the false Messiah and kind of the true Messiah / the one who will die and then ascend and become godlike, which of course is Leto. And then the one that just dies and stays dead, which Paul ends up being more like John the Baptist, which I think we actually call him John the Baptist at a certain point in this book because he like prepares the way for Leto.
Yes.
Which John the Baptist was the one who prepared the way or whatever. This is when my shitty Christian homeschool upbringing helps because I can get all the religious references in Dune. But like Paul and Chani, it's interesting because there are a lot of parallels between Leto and Paul's lives. But what ultimately sets them apart is that Leto is willing to make choices in human choices. So
Yes.
Paul knew he was going to love Chani his entire life. And when he meets her, he cannot give her up. And ultimately, he would rather destroy the universe and destroy himself than give her up and give up even a moment of the life that they share together.
Because their relationship is so meaningful to him.
Right. But then Leto meets somebody who is going to be his love interest, and he sees her in all of his visions. And then there comes a moment where she's going to feed him this spice, this like spice-laden porridge. And he's like, you know what? Actually, you can just bury that. And she's like, they're going to know if I bury it. And he's like, yeah, I don't care. And she's like, they might punish me. And he's like, that kind of sounds like a personal problem. And then it says, he shook his head, shedding her from his visions, feeling new freedom envelop him. No need to kill this poor pawn. She danced to other music, not even knowing the steps, believing that she might yet share the power which lured the hungry pirates of Shulak and Jacarutu. Leto went to the door seal and put a hand upon it. He's like, you know what, actually, I think I'm good.
So this is where we really start showing that the way Paul used his prescience, his future sight, was very heavy-handed.
Yeah, and ultimately self-serving.
Yes.
Yeah.
He took, like, when you do like meditation stuff, one of the things they tell you is the thoughts that just pop into your head, aren't true.
Yeah.
They're just thoughts. and you need to like evaluate them. The visions that pop into your head are not truth. They're a possibility.
Yeah.
Paul takes every vision that he has as concrete truth, and that's what traps him.
Yeah.
And Leto's like, oh, I can see the temptation of that. It gives you a lot of certainty about what's going to happen, which reduces anxiety, but it reduces options too.
Yeah.
So I can see that this is like a firm timeline of what could happen if things keep going the way they're going. But that's not the option that I want to take. And I don't want to limit my other options by pursuing that path. So he cuts off that timeline.
Yeah. Or as he says, because he has the wisdom to be ruthless without being cruel, to know when kindness is in fact the way to greater cruelty.
Right. So the thing that Paul could not do was Paul saw the option of becoming the worm, like bonding with the sand trout, and becoming the not human emperor of humanity, but that would lead to Kralizek.
Yeah.
And Kralizek is just like a wipe out most of humanity. And that cost was too high for Paul. But Leto can see beyond that. And to him, Kralizek is, yes, it's a lot of suffering, but it's a crucible that once humanity passes through, there's like higher heights than the depths of Kralizek.
Yeah.
On the other side of it.
But we have to survive it. We have to be set up to survive it.
It's going to happen. So we need to prepare for it. And it's like a necessary step in the evolution of human civilization.
Right.
It needs to happen. So Lita's going to make sure that it does happen with the best outcome, which is kind of what Paul did with the jihad. He saw that the jihad was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so he made sure that when it happened, it would have the minimal suffering on the universe, which he still like kept a lot of guilt about, that he caused all of this suffering, even though he can evaluate more than anybody how much more suffering there would have been if he hadn't so carefully managed events.
There just wasn't a path without it.
Right.
That he could see. Yeah.
Because he saw the landscape of the future, and like he never closed his eyes. So he locked that set of possibilities into his reality.
When the center does not move, you are in its path. Do you think he wrote, like he just sat down and wrote? Can you imagine how exhausting it would be to come up with all of this stuff just in one fluid? Like I sit down and write an entire chapter of just quote after quote of fucking bangers, like over and over. Can we talk about for a minute how this man constructed 3 novels that are really long, almost exclusively of dialogue? And how these characters, when they aren't talking with each other in order to illustrate the plot, they're talking to themselves. Yeah. Dialogue. This man wrote dialogue. And yet stuff happens. You're aware of stuff that happens. And yet almost all of it is expressed with dialogue. Okay, Duncan kidnapped Jessica and he's taking her to Seleucia Secundus. Are we talking about Duncan putting her in the ornithopter? Are we talking about them loading onto the Highliner? Are we talking about any of that? No, Duncan and Jessica are having a conversation. Where are we going? I'm taking you to Seleucia Secundus. Do you think that's a good idea? I don't fucking know, but it's better than all the other bad ideas. Okay.
Right.
I hear you.
It's such a good example of show, don't tell.
Show don't tell.
Where they could have said Jessica and Duncan rode in the ship all the way to the planet Seleucus Secundus.
Yeah.
Right? In like summary form.
No.
No, there's
we get
none
no
of that.
descriptive action. Very little description. That's why the last 25% is so jarring, because we finally get descriptive action, and it's almost exclusively of what Leto is doing, because he's alone, and there's only so much he can really think about what. But even then, it's him like, I think there's cilia sticking out of my back that are looking for food. That's pretty cool. And then he intercepts his dad, and he and his dad have this conversation. There's some brief action here because he breaks the guard's neck, and he's like, "Would you look at that? You got a new guide.
You need a guide. Your guide just died.
What? Look,
you need a guide. And hey, I want to hang out with you. I want some father-son bonding time.
Well, Paul is like, you're not my son, but you're kind of my son. Like, I'm happy to see you, but I'm not. I'm having complicated emotions right now. And Leto
I don't like it.
And I don't
it's like Murderbot. I'm having an emotion and I don't like it.
I'm having a lot of emotions. And Leto is like, it's cool. I get it. But you know what we're going to do. And Paul's like, oh, I have known what we're going to do. Because at the end of Dune Messiah, he loses his prescient vision because he's mourning Chani. And then while he was at Jakarutu, he got it back because
they forced it into him.
They kind of forced, and he kind of healed a little. He moved on. He was able,
not moved on, but passed. Yeah.
He was able to kind of reclaim that part of himself. So he knew kind of that this was coming. And Leto's like, great, we're going back. And he's like, if we go back, they're going to kill me. And he's like, are you mad about that? And Paul's like, not really. No, let's go. Let's go. So they head back to the city. And he gives like an impassioned speech. He's like, Alia is evil. I am Muad'Dib. You guys have been following me this whole time like fucking suckers. I can't believe you didn't let me go. I walked away. What is happening? And he gets killed. He gets, like, for goodsies, he gone. He gets stabbed. He's dead. Right there on the floor in, like, the womb of heaven's
Alia's temple.
And that's it. That is the end of Paul Muad'Dib. And they're all watching this happen. And the people in the room are, I think, Ghanima. Not Ghanima quite yet, but
it's the Alia, Lady Jessica, Farad'n, and is it Teokanik? Is it?
Yeah, but they're all in the room. It's not really Ghanima and Leto yet, because Ghanima brings what she thinks is Paul's guide, because she's so brainwashed she doesn't even recognize her brother. And then he's like, I went to seek the golden path. Bloop. The golden path. And Ghanima's like, Leto, oh my God, I missed you. Because that was like their code word. Well, they had a code word. He says it anyway. And it like unlocks her brainwashing. And she's like, I fucking knew you wouldn't die. And he's like I'd die on you. And then he's like, Alia.
Oh, yeah. She's like, did it work? And he's like, kinda.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. And then he's like, you know who is going to die, though? Alia. Sup, auntie? And she's like, I'm not going to die. And
you do it or I do it.
Yeah, you do it or I do it. And then he breaks the window with his, like, mind powers. And Alia's like, what am I supposed to do with that? And he's like, you know what you're supposed to do with that. And Alia, to her credit, does regain the ability to use her own body just long enough to end her own life. So that's the end of Alia. That's the end of Paul. And who's left standing in the wreckage but I don't want to call her selfish. Is Jessica selfish? She had this son out of time, which ultimately created this jihad that killed billions of people and spawned the living God who will bring about the apocalypse.
But the apocalypse that will produce...
he will fire the crucible.
The golden path.
I don't know. I have a lot of complicated emotions about Jessica, I guess, because while all of this is happening to her daughter and her grandkids and her son, she has fucked off slightly involuntarily to Seleucus Secundus, where she is training Farad'n in the ways of the Bene Gesserit, like the son she wished she'd had. Because
Paul wasn't around anymore.
Because he's intelligent but biddable. He's formidably intelligent. She shows up and she's like, it's not cool that your mom tried to kill Leto and Ganima, and the Bene Gesserit are like not okay with this because they sent him a message that's like, we know. And she's like, there's some hidden subtext here, which is kind of like, you do something about it or we do something about it, and you won't be happy if we're the ones who have to do something about it. Yeah. And so he banishes his mom, and that's it. She's in this book like in the beginning for like a tiny chunk, most of it which is just Farad'n going, God, she's such an idiot. God, why is she not keeping up?
Which I thought it was a good example of it kind of puts the universe of Dune into scale, where you have this powerful house.
Yeah.
House Carino. And you have the lead people. You have Wensicia and Farad'n in charge of this powerful house that has a path to challenge House Atreides.
Yeah.
In being the emperor or empress, whatever. And you have this very careful scheming and plotting and political maneuvering. And it ends up with Wensicia just getting dismissed. Like all of that ambition, all of the resources spent on that scheming and planning and plotting. And it was just a drop in the ocean of the whole universe. Yeah. Of other people like that.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing that.
And she
not
wasn't
everybody
doing it
has
better
as
than
clean
else.
of a path as she did.
Yeah.
Like she had like a flush hand and she played it bad.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what Wensicia does for the plot. For Jessica, I feel like in the first book, she was a strong character who her character helped to drive the story. But then in Children of Dune, she's more like the instrument of somebody else, and she's not really getting to be Jessica and doing what Jessica would want to do. She's just kind of...
Well, that's because what Jessica wants to do is stay on Caladan and eat grapes and get served by buff dudes that fan her in her hammock.
And be lusted after by Gurney.
Yeah, that's... Given the opportunity to act freely, she just left. She just fucked off.
So she's only here because she's being coerced, too.
Yeah, the Bene Gesserit
and so she
asked her to go back, and she's like, oh, fine.
She kind of goes through the motions of... following the explicit orders from the Bene Gesserit. And Jessica's character is kind of like wasted.
Well, I think Farad'n is her attempt at redemption. It's like, I had a son. I thought this was going to work out. It got weird. I didn't like it. Then I had a daughter, way weirder. And so I was just like, cut my losses. Let's go back to Caladan. I'm going to sit on the beach for 21 years. And then the Bene Gesserit sent her a text that was like, clean up your fucking mess. And so she went back to Dune to try to do that. And
she swept it under the rug
and she
said, I'm done.
She was like, I'm coming to visit y'all. And they were like, no, you're not. And she's like, God damn it. They guessed my motives. And so the first time she meets any kind of friction, and Idaho is like, I'm getting you off this planet for your own good. She's like, great. I love my own good. Let's do that. And so they leave and go to Seleucus Secundus. And she's like, well, I could probably make it good here. Farad'n's nice. He seems nice. He's biddable. He's intelligent. He's he's a nerd. Like, he likes to read books, and that's pretty much it. And when Sissy is kind of an idiot and she played her hand too soon, and I can just get her gone. And then once I get her gone, like, I've got the run of the place. And so that's exactly what she does. And then she ends up turning Farad'n into a Bene Gesserit. Like, she swears
basically
him
the
in.
same thing she did with Paul.
Right, except that he's not prescient in the way that Paul was. He's just a nerdy, smart guy.
I think a big difference between Paul and Farad'n. Okay, first,
Farad'n has no ambition.
Similarities. Yeah, similarities. They both they're pretty much cousins.
Well, Paul never had ambition either, but
I think Paul did have
no.
some.
Jessica's ambition was to stay alive. She used Paul to do it, and as soon as that was done, she noped.
Paul was raised from birth to exercise his ambitious options.
Okay.
And so that was the level of his training. So when he got to Dune and all this stuff is happening and Jessica's like, all right, we need to fulfill the prophecies, whatever. He's like, okay, well, I've been raised from birth to exercise all of my options that like progress my ambition. Okay. Like, that's what I've been trained to see is lines of like gaining more influence and gaining power or whatever. And Farad'n just got to be a nerdy fuckboy.
Yeah.
And so when Jessica gets there, it's like, oh, here's someone who has very similar like genetic potential to Paul, but just got to be a kid, got to be a nerd. And so
he didn't get to be
Farad'n's
the
like
Messiah at 15? Oh, okay, cool.
Farad'n's like, okay, well, I can do like most of the same things that Paul could. I bet if you dosed him up on spice, something would happen.
Well, he's already addicted to spice. Remember, he wears contact lenses to hide his blue eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Farad'n is a version of what Paul could have been if Paul didn't have all those pressures of being a male when he should have been a female.
Yeah. Yeah, and his dad's not getting murdered before him, and he's not sent out to the...
It's an untraumatized Paul.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
like, why don't we know what it looks like when someone is autistic trauma? Because we don't know any untraumatized people with autism and ADHD. So we literally don't know what that looks like.
No. Aurora.
God bless Aurora. You would know. You are in the top, what percentage fan?
I was in the 0.5%.
Yeah.
Listeners.
Matt listens to almost exclusively Aurora. So if you want to know who Matt is, just put on an Aurora sound. Any album, really.
The entire discography.
Yeah.
So I think Farad'n is the untraumatized version of Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why Farad'n makes such a like good counterpoint to Leto II.
Maybe he feels like a second chance for Jessica.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm
not going to fuck it up this time.
The same thing where I kind of pulled out all this like latent ability.
Yeah.
So that this person could express it in a powerful way. I have another chance to do that in a way that's not going to result in them destroying humanity in the universe.
Yeah.
So that's
right.
attractive from...
Yeah.
That's an attractive proposal from Jessica's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I don't know why. I don't dislike Jessica. She's a character means to an end. It's just that she exploits everyone around her until ultimately she's put into a position where there's nothing to exploit. And so she finally gets to just, I don't know, she trains Farad and then she's like, we're besties now. And then she goes back, see that bitch over there? That's Alia. And he's like, isn't that your daughter? And she's like, not anymore. I don't know what happened. Who raised her? Not me. Literally. I just can't imagine being like, well, that was a mistake and just going back home. You like, it'd be like taking your kids on vacation and
Your
get
5-year-old.
It's like
you go on a family
no.
vacation.
No, you take your 15-year-old on vacation.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And something weird goes down. Your husband gets killed. You're pregnant. You stick around long enough to have the baby. And then you're like, well, you know what, actually? I'm not thinking that this vacation is for me. And when you go home, you leave the kids in the cabin.
So
by themselves.
So all this stuff bad stuff happens on your vacation
with cans and no can opener.
You move into like a spare house in this like little village.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, "Oh, you poor thing, let's help you out." And you kind of you make friends, you get integrated in the community. Everybody is helping you, the poor widow, raise your children. And then you're like, you guys are doing a great job. Bye.
I know. You know what? Actually, I'm going to go get cigarettes at the corner store. I will be, and I swear to this, right back. Okay.
It's like 10 years later. Man.
21. I think that's Check's watch. 21 years later. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not going straight to the end.
Oh, okay.
When she comes back. Just skip forward some time. Man. Mom's been gone for 10 years going to get cigarettes.
If she leaves after the battle with the Emperor, Alia is 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except temporarily she's 2.
Yeah.
But they say she grew fast. So like biologically, she's like 4 or something.
Yeah. And then we just straight invent this whole thing where they can make themselves immortal, but they don't because it's like taboo. But Alia has done the thing where it made herself immortal. This is
probably a thing that got brought up like right after the books were published.
Like, why can they not just make themselves
people
immortal?
Talking about it, like Jessica can manipulate her own biochemistry to the point of like creating the catalyst for the water of life.
Yeah.
To turn it from a poison into a drug. Can they do other stuff like accelerate healing and like keep themselves young or whatever?
I don't know, maybe.
And Frank Herbert's probably like, yeah, that's good.
They can,
yeah,
but
I like
they
that.
don't.
They don't. There's a reason they don't.
Reasons.
I'll explain it in a few years.
Yeah, later. You gotta subscribe to this magazine.
Think.
Oh no, he knew. He knew immediately, and he knew in like prose. Like I think Frank Herbert thought in poetry. Like I just don't think he.
It just comes to him.
It just came to him. Yeah. Can you imagine like having? So there's this documentary which I recommend everybody watch just because it's so weirdly intense. But it's called Rivers and Streams, and it's about this artist who's this environmental artist. And this guy legit goes out and for 10, 12 hours a day, he like stitches leaves together with thorns. Or he'll create these dye balls made out of dirt and throw them in the river and then like watch the dye balls slowly dissolve in the river. Or he'll make these beehives out of rocks. Or he does these just really intense, really ephemeral things that require great concentration and like quietness of spirit to be able to complete. And there's a scene where he's sitting at the kitchen table and they have everything sped up around him. And he's literally just sitting at the kitchen table. And it looks like about an hour passes while everybody's running around in the background at fast forward. And he just sits there. And I have to imagine that that's what every dinner was like with Frank Herbert. No wonder his son followed in his footsteps and started writing, because he probably never had a regular conversation with his dad. He was probably like, Dad, I have a soccer game this afternoon. And his dad was like, what is soccer? But the meaningless effort of two teams pretending to be on either side of the cosmic conflict when really we're all in this together. And he's like, fuck it, Dad, it's just soccer. And he's like, it's never just soccer. Can you imagine? I can't even imagine. I can't. My favorite part probably at the end is Alia is dead. Paul is dead. Jessica is effectively out of the picture. She's like, can I go back to Caladan now? I would really like to abdicate my responsibility. Can I sign some paperwork? I'm really done now. Because Leto's like, hey, Farad'n, bro, you're going to give me the Sardaukar, and then you're not going to marry my sister, but you are going to father her children, because I'm going to marry her to kind of consolidate imperial power, but
But just for the politics.
But just for the politics, because, spoiler alert, I ain't got no dick no more. And Farad'n's
Look at this. I'm not wearing clothes. It looks like I'm wearing a still suit. No, that's my skin.
I am naked. No, I think he's got a robe on.
Right. But I can imagine him like lifting up the robe and being like, look
what I'm working
with. That's my skin. I'm naked right now.
Yeah.
This is my body, and I'm just wearing this tattered robe on top of it.
Broken for you. And Farad'n's like, man, I'm not giving you the Sardaukar. And he's like, oh, yeah, you are. You are.
Just do it.
And
everybody's doing it.
Then guess what? You get to be the... Think how cool it would be if we got the Sardaukar here and we had the Fremen and the Sardaukar like joined forces and became like super Fremardukar, and like we could just take over the universe or whatever. We could bring about the apocalypse. And Farad'n is like, I'm sorry, fucking what? And he's like, fucking yes. Is that what I heard? Fucking yes, I'm bringing the Sardaukar. He said, yes, y'all. Bring the Sardaukar. And then he's like, oh, by the way, you're going to be a concubine. So best of luck.
And so Farad'n says, I'll resist you every day of my life. So Leto says, but that's the function I expect of you, cousin. It's why I chose you. I'll make it official. I will give you a new name. From this moment, you'll be called Breaking of the Habit, which in our tongue is Hark al-Ada.
He even renames them. He's like, yeah, you're not whatever.
Yeah, you're not Farad'n anymore.
No. You're a new person. You're my keep me sane guy. And Farad'n's like, I'm pretty sure that's too late. And he's like, shh, it's fine.
Come on, Hark al-Ada. You need to keep us sane.
He sticks out a cilia and just trails it down his cheek. It's fine. Oh, this book. The first 3/4 was like, okay, all right. This is dialogue. I'm digging it. Like, I love these lines. This is so sweet. Stuff is happening. I kind of care about what's happening, but I kind of don't. But I just kind of care about what's happening to these people, and these people are cool, and I'm so here. And then it's like,
yeah, there's lots of stuff happening, and it doesn't feel like anybody's being forced, narratively forced into doing anything weird, except maybe Jessica.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I need to wrap this up.
It's possible that Jessica is just an outgrowth of, I'm not sure Frank knew exactly what to do with women. Because he also had Alia, who became an abomination. He had Ghanima, who sort of disappears. She doesn't really disappear, but she also does kind of just disappear. Hera, who's like our one continuous character through all 3 books, who is never used as more than just, would you like coffee? Yeah, cool, I'll go get it. And then we get Wensicia, who gets dismissed almost immediately. Most of his female characters pop in, have a purpose, and then disappear. They do not get the same level of character development that his male characters do. Like, think about how much Paul goes through and how much Paul grows. And then Jessica could have had a similar trajectory. He could have made Jessica into some, or even Irulan, because Irulan is
the
just
way
sort
Irulan gets kind of upgraded in the sci-fi miniseries.
Yeah, is beautiful and perfect.
And it makes it so much better.
It does. And if we had carried that Irulan into Dune Messiah instead of just having her be like, oof, maybe she wasn't as smart as we all thought she was. Ugh. And then by Children of Dune, she just is like Alia mouthpiece, and that's it. And she disappears almost immediately. And it just feels like, oh, maybe Chani. If anybody gets to be a character, like a real character, it's Chani.
Yeah.
And she gets killed off because she wants babies so badly, she's willing to endanger her life to have babies. Which I guess is a real thing, and women do it. And I totally respect that. I think if we hadn't had children as easily as we did, I don't know what lengths I would have gone to have kids. Probably not great ones. But that was just me. It was like, cool, they'd be cool, but not like, let's spend $20,000 on IVF to have them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which is kind of IVF. She gets like spice IVF. But then instead of staying in a hospital, she tries to have a home birth. It just backfires. I don't know. I like all three. I think that this was good, and I'm glad we read these. And I'm really looking forward to watching the miniseries because I cannot stress enough how good of a job sci-fi did in the adaptation of Dune the novel. And then they carry that forward and do an even better job of making Dune Messiah and Children of Dune into this complete, concise, comprehensive, beautiful little narrative that feels so perfect without having to include every single drop of every tiny bit of intrigue and...
Right. They capture the essence.
I mean, this plot is a pretzel. It's parfait. It is layers and layers and layers and layers of twisty ass dialogue. And really the only way to enjoy it is to just kind of shut down and let it flow. Kind of like the way that Leto experiences the future. You just have to dip in, let it flow, and then hop back out. And if you didn't quite get all of it, it's cool. It's all right. There's definitely parts of this that it's like, did you not get that? No worries. Did you forget about the tigers because we haven't talked about them in 230 pages? And since then, there's been about 75 separate conversations. No worries. It's fine. It's fine. They just show up and then they die almost immediately. So no problem. Did you forget when Sissia existed? Great. So did we. Not a problem. We can send her off. And the preacher actually disappears for a good section of the book too. We hear about him tangentially, but we don't see him for a really long time. We just get like Alia's mad because the preacher's still around. And then Alia being like, is he my brother though? I don't know. Is he my brother? It finally takes him grabbing her arm and going, hello, sister. And she's like, does he mean that literally? I think he means that literally. Is he Paul? He could be Paul. He definitely knows how to use the voice.
I think that struggle that she has is, in my mind, supposed to be because she's possessed.
Yeah.
She's not fully in control of her faculties.
She doesn't want to believe he's back because she doesn't want to be seen like that.
Right. And she's so tied up. Her identity is so tied up in being the sister of Paul Muad'Dib, who is gone.
Yeah.
That if he was known to have come back, it would just completely mess up how she's structured the world around her.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
So she's probably half deliberately distracting herself from seriously entertaining that as a possibility. And also the other half that would have recognized I'm bullshitting myself.
Yeah.
Is busy fending off the Harkonnen.
Yeah.
Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah. I will say one of the things that was hard for me in this book is picturing old Paul, because when we do the miniseries, God bless the actor who played Paul in the first one, they bring him back to play old, wizened, like dried out husk Paul.
Uh-huh.
And he really commits to the raspy voice, the like, you are all dead. Is it the most successful part of the miniseries? Not to my recollection. And so every time I heard his dialogue, I heard it as the like, you've grown water fat. And the like, like the voice he does. And they give him these dry ass lips that look like dry and cracked.
Oh, man. Yes, his lips look so chapped.
So chapped. And then his hairline is supposed to be like thin, but it's just really weirdly. It's not the best. Okay. I mean, it's fine. It's just not great. Everything else is great. James McAvoy as Leto, great. The actress who plays older Alia, great. The guy who they brought back to play Duncan, who I don't think is the guy who plays Duncan in the first one, also great. The bringing back the actor who played Liette Kynes to be another character who is unrelated to Liette Kynes, perfect. I'm happy for this. Not a problem. The lady who plays Chani in both. Beautiful job. Fucking perfect. Irulan, great. Love it. Everything is great. Is the old makeup on Paul great? Apparently not, because it stuck out enough to me that every time they described the preacher, I was like, oh God, like it's coming. As soon as I finish this book, I've got to watch the miniseries with chapped ass Paul. He just looks like a wrung out sponge, which is what he's supposed to look like. He's supposed to look like weather beaten and like he's been in the desert. Like he's a desert creature. He's supposed to look Fremen. And that's what everybody says when he comes by is like, wow, he is like...
He's a capital R real Fremen.
He's a Fremen, like the kind of Fremen that no longer exists. And the bittersweetness of this is a world that no longer has to be as hard. So the people don't have to be as hard. So we can let those traditions go because they no longer serve us. But also, look what we lost. Look what we lost. Like, people now have to lock their doors. People get assaulted and taken because I think at one point he says it's a curious thing that the more men have, the more they want. Mm-hmm. But the less they have, the more they are willing to give away. Penny. But just that, I feel like it's almost universal, that sensation that the thing that you had was better than you was the best. And really it's like the good lives longer than the evil. You forget how harsh it made the Fremen, and yet it's like, oh God, they've lost so much.
But it then gave all the meaning to their lives.
Right. And so now they're just like everybody else. They're just like everybody else in the Imperium. Everything they want, they get. Except everybody's stockpiling spice because pretty soon there will be no spice. And he's like, don't worry, everybody's got enough stockpile. It'll get us through until... And they're like,
4,000 years?
Until what? And he's like, ...
The duration.
The duration. It'll do for the duration. So I guess what I'll leave you guys with before we move into the miniseries, because I think we could wrap this up, unless there's something else you wanted to talk about.
I think we've hit everything.
Yeah.
I have a lot to say about.
I'm just going to end it here with, I stand in the sacred human presence. As I do now, so should you stand someday. I pray to your presence that this be so. The future remains uncertain, and so it should, for it is the canvas upon which we paint our desires. Thus always the human condition faces a beautifully empty canvas. We possess only this moment in which to dedicate ourselves continuously to the sacred presence which we share and create.
So remember, sometimes the strangest things are the most beautiful too.
So be who you are and love what you love. Until next time, friends.
Bye.